Welcome back to the channel. We're getting back on to the twin turbo Dodge Dakota. The 8.8 is in, as you saw from the last video, but I've had some complications. Nothing major. The left side shock had a 1/4 inch of travel left once I actually set it on the ground. So part of my playing with pinion angle and moving that bracket, I did correct some shock angle, which was good, but that also caused the shock to be a little too long. Now the shocks that were on it were something I took off of my Ram, and it wasn't actually something that belonged to my Ram. It was just I found a shock and a length that worked for that, and I stuck it on here because these were blown at the time. So we're gonna fix that today. I've ordered some shocks from DJM, and I'll show you those. These are the CalMax shocks I ordered. There's two different lengths because I checked and I need two different lengths. This is 9 1/4 compressed. This one is the, let's see, 1409 part number. There's 9 1/4 compressed, 14.5 extended, as far as what is said on their website. So I've got one of these, and I've got a 1309, which is 9 1/4 compressed and 13.5 extended. I don't know exactly how that works, but that's going to work just fine, because the problem I had is one shock is on the rear and one shock is on the front. And because everything's altered, I can't guarantee I welded everything on the right place. I can't guarantee that it being lowered and everything, that the distance from the upper shock mount to the lower to the axle is the same front to rear. They may have had different compressions. I'm sure the same length for if you bought one for a factory Dakota, but I don't necessarily know if they've got the same amount of squish on them just sitting there at ride height. But beside the point, when you do custom stuff, sometimes you gotta order custom parts. It's just part of it. Because right now, with this sitting on the ground, this has a 1/4 inch. Because right now, this has a 1/4 inch of travel before it bottoms out, and this one's got about 1 1/4 inches. So this is pretty flat. The one over here is tipped down a little bit, which is gonna help it. But my thought is that the difference between here and the top mount and there and the top mount, as far as from axle center, is probably a little different. So it probably is different on a factory one. Even if it's not, it doesn't really matter. These aren't Dodge Dakota shocks. These came off my Ram, and these aren't Ram shocks. I had it lowered and it rode a little funny, and because of the shock angle, I was trying to help it with a hysteresis issue. You could hit bumps and it would do things, but it wasn't enough movement. The shock had enough of where there's some movement, but it doesn't actually dampen anything. It's just flopping around because of the shock angle. So I ended up double stacking shocks, and it helped, but it still didn't get rid of my problem until I moved the shock eyes on the bottom. I moved everything over. I think I moved the top up, and they weren't exactly straight up and down, but a hell of a lot closer. And when I lowered this truck with, I think I have the Beltec or DJ, no, it's DJM. I've got the drop purchase on this thing. It looks like a 4-inch drop, I believe. When I did that, the factory shocks were too long, so I went and borrowed some off the Ram. And that's why these are on here. So anyway, now I've measured, and the 9 1/4 will be fine. I am going to C-notch the frame eventually, just a little bit, because right now I've got 3/4 of an inch of clearance, which is not enough. So we need a couple more. We'll end up C-notching it, and the 9 1/4 inch compressed shock, even mounted where it's at right now, will give us enough room to be safe and not going to bottom it out. Now, it will not let us get to this amount of droop right now. That's just hanging. It's not a problem. The amount of droop it will have will be fine for if it's just driving on the street or hitting some good bumps. It's not gonna bottom out the shock or overextend the shock. There's no reason besides jacking it up you should ever have that much droop on a truck like this. So I'm not worried about it. When we get to drag racing or playing with Caltrax later on, we will make sure that we're not limited by the shocks, because I think that's when things start to become a problem. But we'll address that when we get there. So anyway, we've got shocks. I'm going to take these off. It's a 15mm head of the bolt, 18mm nut, and we'll compare them. I don't have any way to meter that one is stronger than the other, except for I'm going to squish it with my arms and tell you that one is stronger than the other, or they feel the same. So it's going to be super scientific. Anyway, let's get these off and compare them and get them on. After that, I think we're going to look at some brake issues. like the extended is pretty damn close to the same. Maybe an inch shorter. These aren't blown, they're actually pretty decent for a factory. This is a Spectrum brand. Not the stiffest though. I'll try out of this. That's definitely better. Holy crap. Yeah, definitely much stiffer. These come with, well, of course it's got bushings in it, but then it's got these sleeves of varying thicknesses. You get this too. You can put this in there if you have that style. You can order the same thing with a stud if it's for the front. But it comes with all these sleeves to slide in for different bolt sizes. So let me grab a bolt. And we'll see what size fits. Loose. That one might be a little on the snug side. That's our guy right there. A little bit of play. Oh, it's still got less play than the stock one. Oh, that's also because these don't belong on the Dakota. So, not stock. So, we're going to slide these sleeves in and get this back on the truck. This one goes on the passenger side and the 1309 goes on the driver's side on mine. Well, right now we're going to mount these like this because this thing has an arrow and says top. I don't know if it actually matters. I'll email them and ask them, but I usually like to do it like this, and it's just a minute tiny thing. But with it like this, I feel like this is more the weight is sprung, even though it doesn't weigh much, so it's really something that probably doesn't matter. But because that does say top, we're just going to put this at the top. Let's get them in. More slightly annoying things, because this is not made for this exact application. I've got a gap here, so I'm gonna have to put some washers in, which I'm not against. It's not the perfect set of shocks, I guess, but it is what it is. Looks like I had a lapse in judgment. It's going to be fine, but now that it's actually hanging in there and the shocks were there, I had to pick up the driver's side a little bit to get the shock in, or the passenger side, it was the exact right length. Full droop was perfect. Driver's side, I had to compress the suspension just a tick at full droop. So it's hitting 3/4 of an inch early in the driver's side at full droop, which it should never get to anyway, and the compression is the same. So it looks like a swing and a miss, but either way it's still going to work. So for the future, I know I can get the 1409 on both sides and we'll be good to go. But it is what it is, we'll be alright. Those are in and tight. So now we're going to pull the wheels off and kind of check out the brakes, bleed them again. I didn't have anyone here to help me at the time, so I just gravity bled, and then I've got a vacuum bleeder now. But I didn't really feel them doing anything. I'm pretty sure that's because of the proportioning valve, and that makes sense because I went out and it was not very heavy rain, but a rainy day, and just stabbed in the brakes to see what would lock up first, and of course the front locked up first. And thinking about how the proportioning valve works, that makes sense. Now, some people have been taking the spring out. Apparently SSBC is what I've been told in the comments, and by, I think, yeah, just in the comments, that their kit, their instructions are to pull the spring out. Another guy commented about putting a way weaker spring in it, and that's fine. What I've read is you only need a proportioning valve if the rear locks up first. So essentially we can tune it with springs if that's an issue. So I think I'll pull it out and I will go find some springs and play around with it. But I might do some testing. If I go out stabbing the brakes and the back locks up, then we need a spring. If it doesn't, then we're probably fine. Now, I believe the spring he put in was a very, very light spring, almost like having nothing, so I wouldn't think it's anything too drastic. But we'll get that resolved so all our brakes are functioning properly. It's a little noisy, all the neighbors are out doing stuff, but we're gonna try to address the proportioning valve. I had my girl hit the brakes so I could see what the rear was doing, and it takes quite a bit of pressure before the rear does anything. So I think at first we're just gonna take the spring out of here, and then I'll go do a brake stand. If the back locks up first, then I'll put the seal and the spring back in, and we'll start playing with it. From what I've gathered, that's the instructions for that SSBC kit. And it looks like I've had some rats in here. That's not awesome. Poo-poo. Bastards. Well, anyway, I've got some pinchies to help hold the valve, and a 3/4, no, actually 19 millimeter, but 3/4 to get the nut off, and a rag to catch some fluid. So hopefully this doesn't go too bad. It's the next morning. Me and Monica went to the store and drove it last night. The brakes seem definitely better. It may have been because I had help bleeding it instead of using the vacuum bleeder. I went until I quit getting air, but that doesn't really mean much. There still could have been something stuck somewhere. So having someone to work the pedal definitely made it better. Spring in, it was definitely a softer pedal and more delayed. Spring out, just like a rock, it was awesome. I step on the brake pretty hard, had to intentionally lock it up. The front locks up first like it's supposed to, the back doesn't lock up and try to come around, and it slows down pretty quick. I'm not going to say the discs are necessarily better than the drums in the back. The drum's more of an on-off switch. Hauling a trailer, I would rather have drums, but as a hot rodder, I'd want the discs. It looks cool, it's cleaner. I think upgrading's cooler. Get nice, pretty calipers, all that good stuff. So, brake part, we're done with that for now. Eventually, I would like to get where all the brakes lock up and then proportion control it so that it goes back to the front. Because I think there's more to be desired. I think the back could do more. That really depends on how much tire you got, though, I guess. But the rotors are rusty, the pads are old. There's no telling the friction coefficient of all that crap right now. It could have plenty of pressure back there, just everything's all rusty and gross. So we're gonna leave that alone. It drives fine, stops fine, that's great. The new shocks on the back, plus the fixing the shock angle as best as possible, is a whole different truck. It feels so good. Before it was very floppy, and those shocks were good, the Spectrum ones. They weren't blown like I thought they were, just that shock angle sucks ass. Every bump you hit it just feels loose, felt like crap. And it hit the frame all the time, that's why it's going to C-notch it. I drove it hard yesterday, hitting things intentionally, not slowing down. I never hit the frame, and it feels so good. So I'm very happy with that. I'm happy how that turned out. Whenever we do the front we're going to use Mustang knuckles, I believe, in 2013 up brakes and stuff. I think I want to run a 17-inch wheel minimum when I do the drag pack. The other set of wheels, planning on getting wheels for that in the back. It's the same looking wheel, just fatter on the Challenger. Taking those two wheels for this and finding another set, or another two more wheels for the Dakota. So I've got a drag pack with skinnies up front, and then I've got my regular driving wheels and tires. Challenger's 5 on 115, Dakota's 114, or 5 on 4.5, 114.3 or something like that. So it's slightly different, so I'll have to run adapters. But because of the back spacing of that wheel, I'm gonna have to run spacers anyway. So I'll just get a good set of spacers. I've run them on the Jeep, I've run them on the street. I'm not worried about it. If you cheap out, you get what you pay for. So for the drag radials, no adapters. We want that straight on there. For regular driving, it'll be fine with the spacers and the adapter spacers. So that's the plan for that. I did some studying. The reluctor wheel in the 9 1/4 is supposed to be 108 teeth. The reluctor wheel in an 8.8 is supposed to be 108 teeth. I may go to pull apart and go rob a connector, so I can be done with it. So maybe we'll do that. Got back from the pull apart. I don't have any butt connectors, but I was gonna drive the truck to the store to get some butt connectors, so I've just got the wires from the pigtail off of the Explorer jammed in to the 9 1/4 one. Pins are different. Explorer's round. These are some fancy square pin or whatever. It's just different. So I've got these jammed in there so I can test it on my test drive to see if it works at all. On our way to go get some butt connectors and maybe some more brake clean, because right after this I'm starting to work on the transmission. We're gonna need more brake clean. Oh, let's go. ABS lights went off and the brake light went off. I really need to fix the computer one day. Idle air control does not work on this thing at all. I've tested the circuits and the computer's just crapped out. Also, the fuel gauge doesn't work for like the same reason, I think. Let's go put fuel in. Peel is ridiculous in this thing. It feels like it makes 200 horsepower. It just annihilates that one tire. It was fun for about 5 minutes. Now it's annoying because the truck doesn't pull. Try brake stand for a second. Works. ABS still works. Hell yeah. I mean, it makes sense. 108 tooth reluctor wheel to 108 tooth reluctor wheel. It doesn't know what the hell's in it. Alright. Went and got some barrel type butt connectors that aren't insulated and some heat shrink. So red to red, green and black to white and black, or white and whatever that might be. That might be violet. But either way, red to red and the other wire to the other wire. And we're done. I'm going to tape it up, put a little loom on it, and put some zip ties on once I get it plugged in. And then we're done. Well, that's pretty much going to be it for this video. We've fixed some of the small nuisance little problems. And we'll just keep taking away at this thing. The next big thing, obviously, or like I stated earlier, is the transmission. I want to start driving this thing to work again. It is not good on gas, but the more I drive it, the more I play with it and start fixing things. I have played with this. Let me grab this coupler. I've still got the turbos just open. I could get turbo guards, but this one is fine. By the time I put one of these on there, kick that up out of the way, I can get a tube on there just fine, elbow over, put a filter right here. This one over here is a little tighter, but still doable. If I get that guy slid up on there, you can see that I wish I lowered the turbo a little more, but had I done that I would have had more problems over here. Now I could have scalloped this, but I didn't want to. But I think I can get a tube in there. I will have to flatten the spots that are going to touch right here, but I think I can do it. And I'm not against taking a little bit of plastic, or if there's enough room, just letting the radiator come up a little bit. That won't hurt anything as long as it's got hood clearance by shimming the bushings below to help give a little more space. And then I'll get my filters here, and then I don't have to worry about sucking in crap. Filters being in front of the radiator, probably not the best thing in the world. In slow speeds, at highway speeds, or actually driving, I don't think it's really going to matter. I think it's going to be fine. It at least stops crap from getting in there. I could use round filters that'll fit, or eventually make it so I can use flat panel filters so it only pulls from the front and not the back, but that's kind of blocking off flow to the radiator and eventually may become a problem all its own. In the end, we're not trying to make a bajillion horsepower. I mean, I want to make all of it that I can, but I'd just rather have filters on it than just a turbo sucking crap in or turbo guards. Because right now, heat from radiator right into turbo. Also, we've got vehicle speed, so it probably doesn't matter there either. But I want something on it, and that's my plan. I think it'll look cool. I got this space available because the intercooler fits so good down here. I don't foresee ever needing to get a bigger intercooler, so we should be good. Well, that's gonna be it for now. This thing runs good. I'll fix the transmission after we have all the gears going. I've got to get the 31 spline, the Eaton True Track. Got to get that, because right now you can't use any gear. It's the first, second, third. When it comes up on boost and you barely hit a bump in the road, it just annihilates that one tire. It's kind of funny, but it's super annoying. Anyway, thank you for watching, and we'll keep working.